His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he raised it to touch her face. The entire hall held its breath, the torches spitting sparks that danced like fearful, accusing eyes. Lyra felt the warmth of his skin even before the contact, a heat that burned hotter than the flames, charged with something that wasn't anger, but surrender. The air was thick, heavy with smoke, sweat, and the fearful, metallic tang of fear. She didn't flinch. Her eyes, dark as the night that surrounded them, locked onto his, defying the weight of an entire kingdom. The touch came, light, almost a caress.
Yet it carried a weight that made the floor tremble. A surprised silence fell, as if the whole world had stopped to watch the moment the Alpha King bowed, not from weakness, but from something no one there could comprehend. Her heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo off the stone walls. And then, the world seemed to shatter. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and let us know what city you're reading from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The bell tolled again, a dry sound slicing through the pre-dawn darkness like a knife. Lyra woke to the sound.
Her body curled in the corner of the cold room, where the straw mattress creaked with every move. The air was heavy, smelling of mildew and burnt wood. She ran a hand over her face, feeling the dampness of the stone wall beneath her fingers. It wasn't the first time the bell had torn her from sleep, but this time, something felt different. A fearful weight on her chest, as if the air itself knew what was coming. Outside, the clan's courtyard was already starting to fill. The voices of the maids echoed, mixed with the clatter of buckets and the distant barking of dogs. Lyra stood up, her tired, worn dress brushing against her thin legs. She was the bastard child, as they whispered behind her back. An orphan, brought to the clan as a girl after her mother, an outsider, died of a fever in the lowlands. No one knew who her father was, and that was enough for them to see her as an stain on the clan's pristine tapestry. She descended the narrow stairs, the railing worn smooth under her fingers. In the courtyard, the activity was frantic. Men carried firewood, women hurried by with baskets of freshly baked bread. The smell of flour and yeast mingled with the smoke from the fires. Lyra kept her head down, as she always did, but her eyes caught everything. The way the other maids moved away as she passed. The disdainful glare from Clara, the head housekeeper, who always seemed to be lurking. "Lyra!" Clara's voice cut through the air, sharp as a whip. "Don't just stand there, girl. Take this basin to the great hall, and hurry. The king doesn't like to wait." Lyra nodded, saying nothing. She picked up the heavy basin, full of hot water, and felt the heat burn her palms. She walked down the corridor, the cold stone floor beneath her bare feet. The great hall was being prepared for the judgment. Torches were already lit, even though it was morning, casting long shadows on the walls. The wooden benches were lined up, and at the far end, the Alpha King's throne seemed to swallow the light. It was made of dark oak, with wolves carved into the arms, their eyes studded with amber that mysterious as if they were alive. She left the basin in the corner where another maid was already waiting with cloths. But before she could step away, a sharp tug on her arm spun her around. It was Livia, one of the clan's favorites, with her blonde hair always perfectly coiffed and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, look who it is," Livia said, her voice as sweet as honey but laced with venom. "The bastard, thinking she can walk around the hall like she's somebody. Get to the kitchens."
That's where you belong. Lyra felt the angry blood rush to her face, but she, confident, held her gaze steady. "I'm just doing what I was told, Livia. Back off." Livia's smile tightened. "Told? Clara told you, and she only does it to humiliate you. You know that, don't you? Everybody knows." The other maids, disgusted, snickered, a low sound that echoed in the empty hall. Lyra clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She, angry, wanted to talk back, to throw it in Livia's face that she was no less than her, that the blood running through her veins was just as warm as anyone else's there. But she swallowed her words. It wasn't worth it. Not yet.
She turned her back and laughed, her heart pounding. In the hallway, the air felt lighter, but the fearful weight on her chest remained. She feared what was coming. The judgment wasn't just another clan ritual. It was about her, about what she had done, about fearful what she was. Hours later, the bell tolled again, and the courtyard emptied. Everyone rushed to the hall. Lyra stayed behind, helping tidy the kitchen, but Clara appeared at the door, her eyes narrowed. "You too, girl. The king wants everyone there, even you." Lyra felt a fearful chill run down her spine. She knew what that meant. The entire clan gathered, the king on his throne and her in the center, like a fearful caged animal. She followed Clara, her heart racing, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hall was packed. The smell of crowded bodies, cheap perfume, and tanned leather filled the air. Lyra was pushed to the center, where the stone floor seemed colder under her feet. The gazes fell on her like stones. The women whispered, the men crossed their arms, some with cruel smiles. And on the throne, there he was, the Alpha King. Lyra had never been this close to him. He was exactly as the stories described, tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked by a thin scar that cut through his left eyebrow. His eyes, amber like the wolves carved into his throne, seemed to fear her soul. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make the air feel thicker, harder to breathe. "Speak!" His voice cut through the silence, blunt and direct. "What do you have to say in your defense?" Lyra lifted her face. The torn hem of her dress brushed the floor, and the dried blood on her wrist itched under her sleeve. She felt the weight of all those stares, but something inside her refused to yield. It wasn't fear, it was something else. A small flame, but one that hoped brighter than all the torches in the hall. "If the truth needs a defense," she said, her voice confident despite the tremor in her hands, "then it's the world that's wrong, not me." A murmur ran through the hall. Someone laughed, but the sound died quickly under the king's gaze. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. Lyra felt the weight of that stare, as if he were trying to dismantle her piece by piece. But she didn't look away. She couldn't. She wouldn't. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt physical. Lyra could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. And then, something changed. The king stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. He descended the steps of the throne, each footfall echoing like thunder. He stopped before her, so close she could feel the heat of his body. The scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to his skin. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "There are laws that hold us to what we are." Lyra lifted her chin. "And there are confident truths that hold us to what we should be." For a second, time stood still. His eyes wavered, and Lyra saw something no one there expected. A crack. A weakness. The Alpha King, the man who never bowed, seemed, for an instant, surprised, almost human. The hall erupted in murmurs. Someone shouted, another laughed. But Lyra didn't hear them. She only saw him, only felt the weight of that moment, as if the entire world were hanging by a thread. And then, the unthinkable happened. He, surprised, knelt. The gesture was slow, almost reverent. The throne behind him looked empty, an open wound in the heart of the clan. Lyra felt the surprised floor disappear from under her feet. The air caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to tell him to get up, but the desperate words wouldn't come. The entire hall was in surprised, faces frozen in a mixture of horror and fascination. "Get up," she desperate whispered, her voice barely audible, "before the world notices." But he didn't move. He remained there, kneeling, looking up at her as if she were the only real thing in the hall. And Lyra, for the first time, felt the weight of something greater than humiliation, something she couldn't name. The next morning was quiet, but the entire clan seemed to vibrate with what had happened. Lyra woke up with her tired body aching, the straw from the mattress digging into her back. The room was dark, only a sliver of gray light entering through the high window. She sat up, her nervous heart still racing, as if the moment in the hall had never ended. The Alpha King, kneeling. The obsessive image wouldn't leave her mind, like a brand burned onto her retinas. She stood, the cold floor biting at her feet. The dress from the day before was still crumpled in the corner, stained with sweat and dust. Lyra grabbed a clean but simple tunic and dressed quickly. She had no mirror, but she knew her hair was tangled, her face pale. It didn't matter. No one looked at her for her beauty. They looked out of curiosity, contempt, or, now, something she didn't yet understand. In the hallway, the smell of warm bread was already taking over. The maids were rushing back and forth, but the atmosphere was different. The whispers were softer, the glances quicker. As Lyra passed, one of the girls, little Joanna, tripped on her own skirt and dropped a basket of apples. The fruit rolled across the floor, and Joanna turned bright red, scrambling to gather them. "Sorry, Lyra," she mumbled, not meeting her eyes. Lyra stopped, knelt, and helped pick up the apples. "It's okay, Joanna. It was nothing." But the gesture didn't go unnoticed. Another maid, Martha, who always hung around with Livia, let out a little laugh. "Look at that. The bastard is a saint now. Going to help everyone, are you?" Lyra ignored her. She finished gathering the apples and stood up, the angry weight of Martha's glare burning her back. She knew what they were saying, that she had bewitched the king, that it was witchcraft, that the entire clan was in danger because of her. Nonsense, but nonsense that could, fearful, cost her dearly. In the kitchen, Clara stood with her arms crossed, her face more severe than usual. Lyra, the hall, now. Lyra's nervous stomach churned. Again? Don't ask. Just go. The walk to the hall seemed longer than the first time. Lyra kept her eyes on the floor, but she felt the nervous stares. The hall was empty except for a few maids straightening the benches. The throne was there, imposing, but vacant. Lyra felt a strange relief, mixed with something she didn't want to admit. Disappointment. Clean here, Clara said, pointing to the spot on the floor where Lyra had stood the night before. And do it right. I don't want a single smudge. Lyra took the bucket and cloth. She knelt, her knee aching against the stone. She began to scrub, the strong smell of soap rising to her nose. Each movement was mechanical, but her mind was elsewhere. On the king's eyes, on his voice, on that moment he had bowed. What had that been? Madness? Weakness? Or something more? She was so lost in thought she didn't hear the footsteps. She only noticed when a shadow fell over her. Lyra looked up, and her surprised heart stopped. It was him, the Alpha King, dressed in a simple tunic, without his usual cloak, but still imposing. His amber eyes stared down at her, and for the first time, Lyra saw something beyond authority, surprised uncertainty. Get up, he said, his voice low, almost a request. Lyra hesitated, the cloth still in her hand. She rose slowly, her body tense. The hall was empty now. The other maids had vanished like smoke. Just the two of them. The throne in the background, the torches extinguished. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. He didn't answer right away. He took a step forward, and Lyra, fearful, instinctively stepped back. He stopped, his hands open, as if trying to show he wasn't a threat. But he was. He always would be. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty in his voice caught her off guard. "What you did yesterday? No one does that. No one." Lyra swallowed hard. "I didn't do anything. I just told the truth." "Truth," he repeated, as if the word were foreign in his mouth. "Around here, truth isn't what matters. It's order, strength, the thing that holds all this together." He made a vague gesture, encompassing the hall, the clan, the world. "And what if the confident order is wrong?" Lyra, aggressive, retorted before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed, but there was no anger. There was something more dangerous, curiosity. He took another step, and now they were so close, Lyra could see the fine lines on his face, the scar that seemed more vivid in the daylight. "You're dangerous," he said, almost a whisper. Lyra laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Me? Dangerous? Look at me. I'm scrubbing floors. You're the king." "Exactly," he said, and there was a gravity to the word that made the air feel heavier. "I am the king, and yesterday I bowed to you." The silence that followed was thick, almost palpable. Lyra could feel her heart beating so fast, it felt like it would burst. She, desperate, wanted to run, to scream, to understand what was happening, but she stood there, frozen, looking at him. "Why?" she asked, her voice a thin thread. He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, the hall door creaked open. Clara entered, her surprised, face pale. "My lord, the counselors are waiting." The king straightened, the mask falling back into place. He nodded, but before he left, he looked at Lyra one last time. This isn't over. And then he was gone, leaving Lyra alone with the bucket, the cloth, and a weight on her chest she didn't know how to carry. In the days that followed, the clan tried to erase what had happened. Orders were given, mouths were silenced. Lyra was kept away from the hall, confined to the kitchen and the heaviest chores. But the stairs followed her. The maids whispered. The men watched her with a mixture of fear and contempt. Livia, especially, seemed determined to make her life a living hell. "Think you're a queen now, do you?" Livia said one afternoon, as Lyra was carrying a basket of firewood. He bowed, but it was just a moment. Men like him don't change. You'll see. Lyra didn't answer. She just kept walking. The tired weight of the wood on her shoulders. But Livia's words stuck in her head like a splinter. What if she was right? What if it was all just a moment, a mistake? But then, why did the king look at her that way? Why had he come back? One night, Lyra was in the courtyard, filling buckets at the well. The moon was full, casting a silver light on the ground. She was pulling the rope, the heavy bucket rising slowly, when she heard footsteps. She turned, and there he was again, the king. No cloak, no crown, just a dark tunic, and those eyes that seemed to see everything. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low. "Neither should you," he answered. But there was an almost light tone to his voice. Lyra, nervous, dropped the rope, the bucket falling with a splash. "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at her, as if trying to decipher something. "I don't know," he said, finally, "but since that day, I can't stop thinking." Lyra felt a warmth rise in her chest, mixed with fear. "This is crazy. You're the king. I'm nothing." "You are not nothing," he said, and the intensity in his voice made her step back. "You are what hopeful no one here has ever dared to be." The silence fell again, heavy, charged. Lyra could feel her heart racing, the air feeling thin. She, fearful, wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't obey. He took a step forward, and she raised her hand as if she could stop the world. "Don't," she said. "Don't do this." He stopped. He looked at her hand, then at her face, and then, for the first time, he smiled. A small, sad, almost sad smile. "All right." And he turned his back, leaving her there with the moon, the well, and a melancholic void that felt bigger than the entire clan. The clan did not forgive. Lyra felt it in every stare, in every silence that fell when she entered the kitchen. The chores got harder, the orders harsher. Clara seemed to have made a personal mission of her life.
That morning, Lyra was sent to the storeroom, a damp, dark place where they kept grain and old tools. The smell of mildew was so strong it made her eyes water. "Sort through the rotten sacks," Clara said, without even looking at her. "And don't take all day." Lyra nodded, picked up a dull knife, and began the work. The sacks were heavy, dust rising in clouds that stuck in her throat. She cut, she sorted, sweat dripping down her forehead, but her mind was elsewhere. On the king, on the night at the well, on that smile that seemed so out of place on his face. She was so focused, she didn't hear the door open. She only noticed when a shadow fell across the sacks. Lyra looked up, and her surprised heart leaped. It was Livia, flanked by two other maids, all of them wearing sarcastic smiles that fooled no one. "Look where the bastard is," Livia said, her voice like spoiled honey. "Hiding with the rats, it suits you." Lyra dropped the knife, wiping her hands on her skirt. "I'm working, Livia. Get out." "Working?" Livia laughed, taking a step forward. "You think you're above us now, don't you? Because the king looked at you? Because he bowed? But you know what I think? It was pity. Nothing but pity." The others laughed, a sound that echoed in the storeroom like a slap. Lyra felt her angry blood boil. Pity? He didn't bow out of pity. He saw something you'll never understand. Livia's eyes narrowed. "Oh, really? And what was that? Tell me, Lyra. What does a bastard like you have that a king wants?" Lyra opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Because, deep down, she didn't know either. She just knew that something had changed. Something that scared even her. Before she could answer, Livia stepped forward and kicked one of the sacks. Rotten grain spilled across the floor, a cloud of dust rising. "Oops," Livia said, her smile widening. "Looks like you have more work to do now." Lyra clenched her fists, her body angry with rage. She wanted to scream, to shove Livia against the wall, but she held back. It wasn't worth it. Not yet. She picked up the knife again, ignoring the laughter, and went back to work. But the hatred burned in her chest, a hot coal that wouldn't go out. Hours later, the storeroom was tidy, but Lyra was exhausted. Her body ached, her calloused hands bleeding in places. She went out to the courtyard, the cool afternoon air offering some relief. She sat in a corner, near the well, and leaned her head against the cold stone. She closed her eyes, trying to erase the day. But the rest didn't last long. Footsteps. Surprised. Heavy. Familiar. Lyra opened her eyes, and there he was. The king. This time flanked by two guards. But his eyes were only on her. "You're hurt," he said bluntly, looking at her hands. Lyra, nervous, hid her hands in the folds of her skirt. "It's nothing, just work." He made a gesture, and the guards stepped away. It was just the two of them, the well between them like a border. "This isn't fair," he said, his voice low. "What they're doing to you." Lyra laughed, a bitter sound. "Fair? There's no fair here, my lord. There's order, and I'm not part of it." He frowned, as if her words were a punch. "I can change that? Can you?" Lyra lifted her face, her eyes flashing with something between anger and defiance. "Then why don't you? Why do you let them treat me like dirt?" The silence that followed was heavy. The king seemed to search for words, but none came.
Lyra felt a anger of satisfaction mixed with something that felt like pain. She wanted him to feel the weight of his words. She wanted him to understand. "I don't know how," he finally admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice disarmed her. Lyra lowered her gaze, her heart tight. "Then don't make promises you can't keep." He took a step forward, but stopped when she shrank back. "Lyra," he said, her name sounding strange on his lips, almost sacred. "I don't know what's happening, but I know I don't want you to suffer." She looked up at him, her eyes welling up, but her voice was firm. "Then stop showing up. Stop looking at me. Stop making me believe that anything can change." He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching her, as if trying to memorize every detail. And then, without a word, he turned and walked away. That night, Lyra didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of crickets drifting in through the window. Her nervous mind was a whirlwind. The king, Livia, the clan, everything seemed to be conspiring to keep her down, but something inside her, confident, refused to stay there. The next day, the entire clan was summoned to the hall again. It wasn't a judgment, but an assembly. Lyra was forced to go, pushed by Clara to the back of the hall. The throne was occupied, the king seated, his face impassive. But his eyes found her in the crowd, and for a second, the world seemed to stop. The assembly was about land, about harvests, about things Lyra barely understood. But in the middle of the speeches, one of the counselors, an old man named Victor, raised his voice. "And the bastard," he said, pointing at Lyra, "she is still here, poisoning the clan with her ideas. After what happened, she should be cast out." The hall erupted in murmurs. Lyra felt her fearful blood run cold. She looked at the king, waiting for what? A defense? Silence? He stood, the movement slow, and the hall fell silent. "Lyra stays," he said, his voice confident, firm, cutting through the air. "She is part of this clan. End of discussion." Victor opened his mouth to protest, but the king's glare silenced him. Lyra felt a relief so profound she almost collapsed. But with the relief came something else, a weight, because now she was his. Somehow she belonged to him. After the assembly, Lyra was summoned to his chambers. It wasn't the throne room, but a smaller room with a crackling fireplace and walls covered in tapestries. He was there, standing, staring into the fire. "Are you okay?" he asked without turning around. Lyra stood at the door, her heart racing. "Why are you doing this?" He turned, his eyes glowing in the firelight. "Because I can't stand to pretend I don't see anymore." She took a step forward, fear mixed with something stronger. "And what do you see?" He smiled, a smile that seemed to hurt. "You. Only you." The air between them felt charged, like before a storm. Lyra could feel her body trembling, but not from fear. It was something else, something that feared her more than any humiliation. "I can't," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "This can't happen." "Why?" he asked, taking a step closer. "Because I'm nothing, and you're everything." He stopped, his face twisting as if her words were a knife. You are not nothing. You are everything I didn't know I needed. Lyra felt tears rise, but she swallowed them. This is madness. Maybe, he said, and took another step, but it's the confident. And then, before she could react, he was there, so close she could feel his heat. His hand rose, hesitant, and touched her face. Lyra froze, the touch burning like fire. She wanted to pull back, to run, but she couldn't. His eyes held her captive, as if they were the only real thing in the world. "Tell me you don't feel it," he whispered. Lyra opened her mouth, but no words came, because she did feel it. She felt it so much it hurt. His touch still burned on Lyra's skin hours later, like a brand that wouldn't fade. She was back in her room, her body curled on the mattress, her heart beating so fast it felt like it would explode. What had happened? How had she let it get to this? The Alpha King, the man who ruled the entire clan, had touched her face, had said those words. And she, like an idiot, had just stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. The night was cold, the wind whistling through the crack in the window. Lyra pulled the thin blanket tighter, but no warmth came. Her mind was a whirlwind. The clan, Livia, Clara, they all hated her. And now, with the king protecting her, the hatred would only grow. She was a target. She always had been, but now it was worse. It was personal. The next morning, the courtyard was quieter than usual. The maids worked in silence, their glances furtive. Lyra went down to the kitchen, her nervous stomach in knots. Clara was there, arms crossed, her face a stone mask. "Lyra," she said, her voice sharp, "you're on field duty today. Help with the harvest, and I don't want any complaints." Lyra nodded, knowing it was useless to argue. The fields were far. The work was hard. The sun burned your skin. It was punishment. Clara knew it. They all did. The walk to the fields was long, the packed dirt road hot under her bare feet. Lyra carried a basket, its weight already aching in her shoulders before she'd even begun. The other women of the clan worked in silence, cutting stalks with rusted sickles. The air smelled of dry earth and sweat. Lyra joined them, her body moving on instinct, but her mind was far away. She thought of him, of his touch, his voice, the way he looked at her, as if he saw beyond the bastard, beyond the maid, beyond everything the clan said she was. But what did he want? What did she want? Because as much as it hurt to admit, she felt something. Something that feared her more than any humiliation. The sun climbed higher, the heat becoming unbearable. Lyra wiped sweat from her forehead, her calloused hands aching with every movement. That's when she saw Livia. She was at the edge of the field, talking with a group of women, her eyes fixed on Lyra. Her angry smile was pure venom. "Well, look who's here," Livia said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The king's favorite. Thought you'd get to stay in the castle, didn't you? But look at you, out here with the rest of us, getting your hands dirty like everyone else." The others laughed, but the sound was forced. Lyra ignored them, continuing her work. But Livia wasn't done. She came closer, the sickle in her hand glinting in the sun. "You know what they're saying?" Livia continued.
her voice low but dripping with disgusted malice. That you got ahead by using other means? That the king only protects you because you spread your legs? Lyra stopped. The sickle fell from her hand, the metal hitting the dirt with a dull thud. She turned, her eyes angry, blazing with rage. "Shut up, Livia!" "Or what?" Livia laughed, taking a step forward. "Gonna cry to the king? Ask him to save you again?" Lyra took a step, her body trembling. "I said, shut your mouth!" Before Livia could respond, one of the older women, Rose, intervened. "That's enough, Livia. Leave the girl alone." Livia scowled, but backed off, the smile still on her face. "Fine, but the truth comes out, Lyra. It always does." Lyra picked up her sickle again, her hands shaking. She desperate to scream, to run, to disappear. But she stayed, cutting stalks, sweat mixing with tears she refused to let fall. The day dragged on, the sun scorching her skin, her body begging for rest. When she finally returned to the castle, Lyra was tired, her feet bleeding, her dress stuck to her body. She went straight to the well, splashing cold water on her face, trying to wash away the day. That's when he, surprised, appeared again. He always showed up when she least expected it.
The king was there, without guards, his tunic sweat-stained, as if he'd been running. "Lyra," he said, his voice urgent, "are you okay?" She laughed, a sarcastic, dry sound. "I'm great. Look at me. I'm thriving." He frowned, moving closer. "I heard about the fields. I didn't order you sent there." "It doesn't matter," she said, turning her face away. "It's what I am. A maid, a bastard. There's no point pretending otherwise." He took her arm, his grip gentle but gentle. "Stop saying that. You're hopeful, not just that." Lyra pulled her arm away, her eyes flashing. "Then what am I? Tell me, because I don't know anymore." He fell silent, his face contorted. "You're you, and that's enough." She shook her head, the tears finally falling. "It's not here, not with them, not with you." He took a step forward, and this time she didn't back away. "Lyra, I don't know what's happening, but I know I don't want to lose you." "Sarcastic," she laughed, bitter. "You never had me." "Maybe not," he said, his voice low. "But I want to." The air between them seemed to vibrate, charged with something neither of them could name. Lyra felt her heart race, her body wanting to give in, but her fearful mind screaming at her to run. She took a step back, the cold well at her back. "This can't happen," she said, her voice trembling. "You know that." "I don't know anything," he aggressively retorted, his voice almost a growl, "except what I feel." Lyra closed her eyes, the world spinning. She wanted to believe him, wanted to throw herself into his arms, forget the clan, forget who she was. But she couldn't. The fearful price was too high. "Go away," she whispered, "please." He stood there for a moment, his face a sad mask of pain, and then, without a word, he obeyed. That night, Lyra didn't sleep. She sat at the window, watching the moon, her fearful heart heavy. She knew something was coming. Something she couldn't stop. In the following days, the clan felt like a pot about to boil over. The whispers were constant, the anger harder. Livia and her friends never missed a chance to poke at her, to trip her, to remind everyone she didn't belong. But the king no longer appeared, at least not where she could see him. Until one night, the bell tolled. Not the sound of judgment, but of fear. Lyra ran to the courtyard, her heart in her throat. The entire clan was gathered, torches lit, the air thick with tension. The king stood in the center, his face grave, talking to the counselors. A group of outsiders has been spotted on the borders, he said, his voice echoing.
We don't know who they are, but they are not welcome. Lyra stood at the back, her body tense. Outsiders, like her mother had been, like she was in a way. She felt a fearful chill run down her spine. After the meeting, the king saw her. His eyes found her in the crowd, and for a second, the world seemed to stop. He made a gesture, almost imperceptible, and Lyra knew what it meant. Come. She hesitated, but she went. She followed him to a corner of the courtyard where the shadows were deepest. What's happening? She asked, her voice low. I don't know, he said, his face worried. But something's wrong, and I don't want you, gently, in the middle of this.
Lyra laughed. Humorless. I'm always in the middle. There's no escaping it. He took her hand, his touch warm. Not this time, I confident, promise. She looked at his hand, then at his face. Don't make promises you can't keep. But he only squeezed her hand, his eyes locked on hers. I confident keep them, whatever it takes. And for the first time, Lyra, hopeful, believed him. The entire clan seemed to be fearful, holding its breath in the days that followed. The outsiders hadn't shown up, but the tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Guards patrolled the walls, dogs barked at night, and conversations in the courtyard were held in whispers.
Lyra felt the weight of it all, but something else consumed her. The king, his promise, the touch of his hand, which still seemed to linger on her skin. She worked in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a knife that trembled slightly in her hands. The smell of herbs and onion filled the air, but couldn't quell the storm in her head. He had said he would protect her, whatever it took. But what did that mean? And why, every time she thought of him, did her chest tighten in a way that hurt and felt alive at the same time? Clara strode into the kitchen, her face more severe than usual. Lyra, the hall, now. Lyra dropped the knife, her heart racing. The hall again, always the hall. She followed Clara, her feet heavy, the corridor seeming longer than ever. The hall was nearly empty, just a few maids sweeping the floor, and the king, standing near the throne, speaking with one of the guards. When he saw her, he dismissed the man with a gesture. "Close the door," he told Clara, who obeyed without question. Lyra stood in the center, the cold floor beneath her feet. The king approached, his amber eyes glowing in the torchlight. "Are you gentle?" he asked, his voice low. "I'm alive," she answered, trying to sound steady. "What's happening?" He hesitated, his face tense. "The outsiders, they left a warning, a message. They want to talk to me, alone." Lyra frowned. "And that's bad?" "It could be," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I don't trust them, and I don't want you near this."
She crossed her arms, her chest tight. "You're pushing me away again." "I'm protecting you," he aggressively retorted, his voice harder. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then explain it to me," she angrily burst out, taking a step forward. "Stop treating me like a child. I'm not weak." He stopped, his eyes narrowing. "I know you're not, but this is bigger than both of us." Lyra shook her head, tears welling up. "Bigger than us? There is no us. There's you, the king, and me, the bastard. That's how it's always been." He took a step, his face contorted. "Stop saying that. You know it's not true." "It is," she angrily shouted, her voice echoing in the hall. "Look at me. Look where I am. You think you can show up, say pretty things, and everything just changes? It doesn't. Nothing changes." The silence that followed was deafening. Lyra felt her chest heave, tears streaming down her face. She desperately wanted to run, to disappear, but she stood there, looking at him, daring him to say she was wrong. He took another step, so close she could feel his warmth. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but firm. "Because I changed. Since that day. Since you made me see." Lyra swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "And what did you see?" He raised his hand, hesitant, and touched her face, wiping away a tear. "That I was wrong. About everything." His touch was warm, almost searing. Lyra closed her eyes, her body trembling. She, desperate, wanted to give in, to lose herself in that moment, but something held her back. Fear, always fear. "I can't," she whispered, stepping back. "This will destroy us." "Maybe," he said, his voice hoarse, "but I'd rather be destroyed with you than live without you." Lyra opened her eyes, the world a blur of tears. She wanted to believe him so badly, but the clan was outside, waiting, judging, ready to crush them. Before she could answer, the hall door, surprised, burst open with a bang. Livia ran in, her face pale, her eyes wide. "My lord, the outsiders, they're at the border, and there's something you need to see." The king straightened, the mask falling back into place. "What is it?" Livia hesitated, glancing at Lyra with angry hatred. "It's a woman. She says she knows the bastard." Lyra felt her fear blood run cold. A woman? Knew her? It couldn't be. Her mother was dead. She had no one else. But fear crept up her spine, cold and sharp. The king looked at her, his face tense. "Stay here," he said, before striding out, Livia at his heels. Lyra stood frozen, her fearful heart beating so loudly it seemed to echo in the empty hall. Who was this woman? What did she want? And why, all of a sudden, did everything feel like it was about to fearful come crashing down? Hours later, the entire clan was in an fearful uproar. The woman had been brought to the courtyard, shackled, her graying hair falling across her face. Lyra was summoned, pushed by Clara to the center where everyone could see. The king was there, his face a stone mask, but his eyes found her, full of fearful something that looked like worry. "Speak," he told the woman. "Who are you?" The woman lifted her face, her surprised eyes fixed on Lyra. They were eyes she knew. Eyes that had sung to her as a child, that had wiped away her tears.
Lyra felt the surprised ground disappear. "Aunt Mara?" she surprised whispered, her voice barely audible. The woman smiled, a weary smile. "Hello, child. You've grown." The courtyard exploded with murmurs. Lyra took a step forward, her body nervous, shaking. "What are you doing here? How—" "I came for you," Mara said, her voice firm despite the shackles. "You don't belong in this place. Angry. You never did." The king frowned, looking from Mara to Lyra. "Explain." Mara laughed, a dry sound. "She's my niece, my sister's daughter, and her father—" She paused, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Her father was from this clan, one of yours, king, one you cast out." The silence that followed was absolute. Lyra felt the surprised world spin, her legs giving way. She sank onto the bed, her face pale. "Your brother?" The king stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Who?" Mara looked at him, her smile vanishing. "It doesn't matter. He's dead. But she carries his blood, and you treat her like dirt for it." Lyra shook her head, tears falling. "Stop, please." But Mara didn't stop. "She's more clan than half of you. And you, king, you know it. That's why you bowed, because you saw what she is." The king looked at Lyra, his face contorted. "Lyra!" She backed away, her sad heart breaking. "No, don't do this." Before she could run, Livia appeared, her face angry with rage. "Lies!" she screamed, pointing at Mara. "She's making it up! The bastard has no clan blood!" The courtyard descended into fearful chaos, shouts, accusations, pointing fingers. Lyra felt the world collapsing, the ground falling away beneath her. She, desperate, wanted to scream, to disappear, but all she could do was look at the king, searching for something, anything. He raised his hand, and silence fell like a guillotine. "Enough," he said, his voice echoing. "The woman will be held until I decide what to do. And Lyra?" He paused, his eyes locked on her. Fearful, "Lyra comes with me." Lyra hesitated, her body trembling, but something in his voice made her obey. She followed him, the courtyard receding behind her, the stairs burning her back. In his chambers, the fire crackled, the warm air a stark contrast to the chill in her chest. The king closed the door, his serious face serious. "Is it true?" Lyra shook her head, tears falling. "I don't know. I never knew anything." He took a step forward, his hand hesitating in the air. "Lyra, gently, look at me." She lifted her face, her eyes swimming. "What do you want from me? Now that you know, now that everyone knows." "I don't care about the blood," he said, his voice firm. "I care about you." Lyra laughed, a sad sound. "You can't, not after this." "I can," he said, taking her hand, and confident, "I will." His touch was warm, but Lyra pulled her hand away, her sad heart shattered. "This will, fearful, destroy everything." "Then let it be destroyed," he said, his eyes aggressive. "But I am not losing you." Lyra closed her eyes, the world spinning. She desperate to believe him, so badly. But the clan was outside, waiting. And now, with the truth exposed, nothing would ever be the same.
The clan was boiling over. The news about Mara and Lyra's supposed bloodline spread like wildfire. In the courtyard, in the kitchens, in the halls, it was all anyone talked about. The bastard, daughter of a traitor. Or a hero, depending on who told the story. Lyra felt the stairs like knives, every step a heavy weight. She was confined to her room, the doors locked, her food brought by Joanna, the only one who still didn't seem afraid of her. "They're going crazy out there," Joanna whispered one morning, leaving a bowl of porridge on the small table. "Livia is saying you're a threat, that you brought the outsiders." Lyra laughed sarcastically, stirring the porridge with her spoon. "Right, because I have that kind of power." Joanna, nervous, hesitated. "The king, he's trying to calm things down, but the counselors aren't happy." Lyra dropped the spoon, her nervous stomach churning. The king, he had promised to protect her, but now, with the entire clan against her, what could he do? She spent her hours staring out the window at the empty courtyard, the high walls like a prison. Her mind kept returning to her Aunt Mara, locked away somewhere, and to the father she never knew. Who was he? Why had the clan cast him out? The desperate questions ate at her, but there were no answers. On the third night, the door opened without a knock. Lyra, surprised, shot up from the bed. Her heart pounding. It was him, the king. His hair was disheveled, his tunic wrinkled, his eyes red, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Lyra," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." She crossed her arms, her body tense. "Talk? Now?" He closed the door, the click echoing in the small room. "I know about Mara. I know what she said, and I know who your father was." Lyra froze, the air caught in her throat. "Who?" He hesitated, his face contorted. "He was my younger brother. He fell in love with an outsider. Your mother, the clan wouldn't accept it. We cast him out. He died shortly after." The surprised world stopped. Lyra felt the floor give way, her legs buckling. She sank onto the bed, her face pale. "Your brother?" The king nodded, his sad eyes glistening. "You're my niece, Lyra. Blood of my blood." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Lyra shook her head, tears falling. "No, this can't be." "It is," he said, kneeling before her, just like that night in the hall. "And that's why I protected you. Not just because of that." He paused, his voice trembling. "Because of you. Because of romantic, how you make me feel." Lyra looked at him, her heart broken. "You knew this whole time?" "No," he said, his voice firm. "I only found out after Mara came. But now it all makes sense." She laughed, a broken sound. "Makes sense? The clan hates me. They'll kill me. They'll kill you." "They won't," he said, taking her hands. "I won't let them." Lyra pulled her hands away, her body shaking. "You can't stop them. Not now." He stood up, his face determined. "I am the king. I can. But Lyra saw the doubt in his eyes, the fear, and that scared her more than anything. In the days that followed, the clan seemed on the verge of revolt. The counselors demanded Lyra's exile, Mara's permanent imprisonment. Livia led the rumor mill, spreading stories that Lyra was a spy, that the outsiders were her allies. The king tried to maintain order, but with each meeting, he returned more tired, more distant. One night, he appeared in her room again, his fearful face pale. "They want a judgment," he said, his voice low. "Tomorrow, for you and for Mara." Lyra felt her fearful blood run cold. "A judgment? I'll stop it," he said, but his voice wavered. "I hope." She looked at him, her sad heart aching. "You can't, not against all of them." He took her face in his hands, his eyes blazing. "I can. For you, I'd do anything." Lyra closed her eyes, tears falling. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was stronger. On the morning of the judgment, the hall was packed. Lyra was fearful, dragged to the center, her hands bound, her dress torn. Mara was beside her, her face bruised but her eyes steady. The king was on the throne, his face a mask, but Lyra could see the tremor in his hands. Victor, the counselor, raised his voice. "This bastard is a threat. She brought the outsiders, poisoned the clan. She and her aunt must be exiled, or worse." The hall erupted in shouts. Lyra felt panic rising, her body trembling. She looked at the king, pleading silently. He stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough!" he yelled. "Lyra is of this clan. She is my niece, and no one will touch her." A shocked silence fell. Victor's eyes widened. "Niece? That's a lie." "It is not," the king said, descending from the throne. "She carries my brother's blood, and I recognize her, here, now." The hall turned into pandemonium. Shouts, accusations, pointing fingers. Livia screamed louder than anyone. "Traitor! He's betraying the clan for a bastard!" Lyra felt the world crumble. She glanced at Mara, who nodded, her eyes full of pride. And then, confident, something inside her snapped. She took a step forward, her voice steady despite her tears. "I am not a threat," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am one of you. I always have been. And if you don't want me, I will go. But I will not let anyone else decide my fate." The king stopped beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "She's not going anywhere, and anyone who disagrees answers to me." The silence that followed was tense, charged. Lyra felt the weight of all those stares, but for the first time, it wasn't just fear. It was strength. She looked at the king, and she saw something new in his eyes, respect. But Livia wouldn't give up. She stepped forward, her face angry. "This is a disgrace! The clan will not accept it!" Before she could say more, the bell tolled. Not the judgment bell, but the alarm. Shouts came from outside, the sound of horses, of clashing metal. The outsiders, they were here. The hall erupted into fear. Guards ran, the king shouted orders. Lyra was pulled along by him, his grip firm on her arm. "Stay with me," he said, his voice urgent. They ran to the courtyard, the cold night air hitting their faces. The outsiders were at the gate.
a small but armed group. At the front stood a tall man with graying hair, his eyes fixed on the king. "Hand over the girl," the man said,
his voice echoing. "She comes with us." Lyra felt panic rise. Mara, who had been brought out, stepped forward. "She goes with no one. She chooses." The king tightened his grip on Lyra's arm, his eyes locked on the man. "She stays." The man let out a cold laugh. "You're not in charge anymore, King. The clan is divided, and the girl is the key." Lyra looked at the king, her heart pounding. What does he mean? He didn't answer. He just pulled her behind him, his body shielding hers. No one touches her. The courtyard was silent, the clan divided, some siding with the king, others hesitating. Livia appeared, her face triumphant. "Give her to them!" she shrieked. "Save the clan!" Lyra felt the sad world crack. She stepped forward, her voice firm. "I'll go." The king spun around, his eyes wide. "No!" "I'll go," she repeated, looking at him, "to end this." He shook his head, his face contorted. "Lyra, don't!" But she was already walking, her melancholy, heart heavy but resolute. Mara followed, her eyes hopeful, glistening. The man smiled, holding out a hand. Lyra stopped before him, her body trembling. "Take me, but leave the clan in peace." The man nodded. Done. The king, desperate, cried out, running toward her, but his guards held him back. "Lyra!" His voice, sad, broke, filled with pain. She looked back one last time, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye." And then she was gone. The gate slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. The clan stood in silence, the king on his knees, his face sad, buried in his hands. The night was cold, the wind cutting Lyra's skin as she followed the outsiders down the dirt road. The horses snorted, the sound of their hooves echoing in the darkness. Mara rode beside her, her face serious, but her eyes held a hopeful look of relief. Lyra said nothing. She just stared ahead, her sad heart. The image of the king on his knees burned into her mind. "Are you gentle, child?" Mara asked, her voice low. Lyra shook her head, tears trapped in her throat. "No." Mara didn't press. She just squeezed her hand, a warm gesture in the cold. Hours passed, the moon climbing in the sky, until they stopped at a makeshift camp hidden among the trees. Fires crackled, the smell of roasting meat filling the air. The tall man, who introduced himself as Gael, helped Lyra down from her horse. "Sit," he said, pointing to a log. "Eat. You need it." Lyra obeyed, her body exhausted. She ate in silence, the food tasteless. Gael sat across from her, his eyes studying her. "Your aunt told me about you," he said, his voice calm. "About what the clan did. About the king." Lyra looked up, her chest tight. "What do you want from me?" Gael smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I want what's fair. Your father was one of us. He was cast out for loving your mother, for wanting something beyond the clan's laws. And now, you carry his blood, the blood that can, hopeful, change everything." Lyra frowned. "Change what?" "The clan.
Mara intervened, sitting beside her. "They're serious, Lyra. The king is weakened. Half the people are with him, half want blood. You are the hopeful proof that their laws are wrong." Lyra shook her head, her nervous heart racing. "I'm not proof of anything. I just desperate wanted to live." Gale chuckled softly. "And you will, but not as a maid, as a confident leader." The shock hit her like a punch. Lyra stood up, her body trembling. "A leader? Me? You're insane." "No," Gale said, his face serious. "You stood up to the king. You made him bow. The clan saw it. They're confident for a change. They just need someone to guide them." Lyra laughed, a broken sound. "I don't know how to guide anyone. I desperately know who I am." Mara took her hand, her eyes firm. "You are your father's daughter, and he was strong, confident. You are strong." Lyra stared into the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. She thought of the king, of his touch, his promise, and now, here, among strangers, she felt something new, a weight, a possibility. The days in the camp were strange. Lyra learned about the outsiders, about the father she never knew. He had been a warrior, a dreamer, cast out for defying the clan, and now she was his legacy. Guile trained her, not with weapons, but with words, how to speak, how to lead, how to inspire. Lyra resisted, but slowly something shifted. She felt a strength growing, the courage that had always been there, but now it had a hopeful name. Meanwhile, in the clan, chaos reigned. The king was no longer the same. He spent his days in the hall, the throne empty. His eyes lost. Livia and the counselors tried to seize power, but the people were divided. Many remembered the night the king had bowed. They remembered Lyra, and they were hopeful, beginning to question. One night, a messenger arrived at the camp. It was Joanna, the young maid, her face smudged with dirt. "Lyra," she said, out of breath, "the fearful clan is falling apart. The king, he's not well. He needs you." Lyra felt her fearful heart stop. "Is he okay?" "No," Joanna said, her sad eyes welling up. "He doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. He just stares into space. And Livia, she's planning to take the throne." Gale smiled, confident, satisfied. "It's time." Lyra shook her head, panic rising. "I can't go back. They hate me." "Not all of them," Joanna said, her voice firm. "Many are with you. They saw what you did. They saw the truth." Lyra looked at Mara, then at Gale. The desperate weight of the choice was crushing her. To go back meant facing everything all over again. To stay meant abandoning the king, abandoning what she felt. "I'll go," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. The return was tense. Lyra rode at the front, Gale and the outsiders behind her, Mara at her side. The clan appeared on the horizon, its dark walls silhouetted against the gray sky. The gate was open, guards hesitating as they approached. The courtyard was packed, the people silent, their eyes fixed on her. Lyra dismounted, her heart pounding, and then she saw him, the king. He stood in the center, thinner, his eyes sunken, but they came alive when he saw her. He took a hesitant step. "Lyra," his sad voice broke. She stopped before him, the air charged.
I came back. Livia appeared, her face angry. Traitor, she screamed, pointing. She brought our enemies. But the people didn't move. Some murmured, others nodded at Lyra. She raised her voice, firm, echoing across the courtyard. I didn't bring enemies. I brought the truth. My father was of this clan. I am of this clan. And the king, she looked at him, her heart aching. The king saw that before any of you. The king took another step, his eyes sad with tears. Lyra! She held up a hand, silencing him. I didn't come to take anything. I came to change things. The laws that cast out my father, that angry treated me like dirt, are wrong, and you know it. The silence was absolute. Victor, the counselor, stepped forward, hesitant. And what do you propose? Lyra took a deep breath, her voice steady. Equality. Blood doesn't define a person. Courage does. And the king, she looked at him, tears falling. The king showed courage. He bowed to me, to the truth. The king fell to his knees, not out of weakness, but confident by choice. I follow you, he said, his voice echoing. You are the leader this clan needs. The courtyard happy erupted in applause, some hesitant, others fervent. Livia screamed but was ignored. Lyra looked at the king, her heart full. He stood, taking her hand. Together, he said, smiling, the first real smile in weeks. Lyra nodded, tears falling, but her chest felt light. The clan would change. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be real. And she, the bastard, the child, was now the hopeful voice that would guide them. The following days were for rebuilding. Laws were revised, Mara was freed, the outsiders were accepted. Lyra and the king worked side by side, the happy respect between them growing, their romantic love blooming in the quiet moments. The throne was no longer his nor hers. It belonged to the clan, to the people. One night, in the courtyard under the full moon, Lyra and the king were alone. He took her hand, his eyes romantic, shining. You changed everything, he said, his voice soft. We changed it, she corrected, smiling. He leaned in, the kiss light, but full of everything they hadn't said. Lyra closed her eyes, the world finally at peace.